Hello everyone, my name is Alana. Welcome to my channel. Before starting the video, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And give this video a like. One of the more vexing instances of this problem is a recurring offender for the comedy spin-off. Even if Young Sheldon Season 6 has encountered several plot holes and inconsistencies from The Big Bang Theory, it is simple to see why Young Sheldon deviated from the Big Bang Theory canon. Sheldon in The Big Bang Theory said that his upbringing was characterized by loneliness and lack of friends, that his father was a careless alcoholic, and that his siblings were mouth-breathing idiots. It goes without saying that this was not the ideal setting for a heartwarming family sitcom. It can be challenging to determine whether plot points are still assured to be included in the spin-off when Young Sheldon modifies the canon of The Big Bang Theory. For instance, according to The Big Bang Theory, Sheldon was about 13 when George Sr. passed away, which seems like a far too significant story piece for the show to ignore. In contrast, Mima, Sheldon's grandmother, behaves somewhat more rebelliously in Young Sheldon than she does in The Big Bang Theory. This is the kind of small alteration that doesn't always need Young Sheldon to explain. Related: why The Big Bang Theory had Christmas episodes while Young Sheldon did not. Pancake Sundae and Textbook Flirting. Episode 10 of Young Sheldon Season 6 featured another recurrent discrepancy in The Big Bang Theory. Sheldon's heartbreaking assertions in The Big Bang Theory that he had no friends as a child have been repeatedly shown to be false in Young Sheldon. It can't be that difficult to make friends because Sheldon has some, George Sr. tells Mary in Pancake Sundae and Textbook Flirting, which contradicts the character's assertions of his upbringing in The Big Bang Theory. This assertion has been completely refuted by Young Sheldon, who, despite his social difficulties, made friends in both school and college. Furthermore, Young Sheldon has already utilized the title character's social skills to support an unrelated plot point. When Young Sheldon's recurring guest star Paige learned that Sheldon was friends with his roommates, she decided she didn't want to continue her education at college, even though George had previously urged Mary to make friends by pointing out that Sheldon had them. Paige left college after realizing that academics wasn't the right path for her, and she was shocked to learn that Sheldon had been able to connect with his roommates despite their age difference. Without entirely altering Young Sheldon's perception of reality, there is one way to explain Sheldon's assertions in The Big Bang Theory. Sheldon may be implying that his buddies from childhood and adolescence were acquaintances, but Raj, Leonard, Penny, and Howard are the first individuals he views as true friends. The Big Bang Theory's assertions regarding Sheldon's early years might be subtly endearing, much like how the discovery that George wasn't an aggressive alcoholic, but rather a likable everyman who passed away far too young, made George and Mary's Young Sheldon story much sadder. His friendships with the members of The Big Bang Theory are more profound than those with Young Sheldon after all. Young Sheldon leaned into a major TBT inconsistency. Again, for fans of The Big Bang Theory, the arrival of Young Sheldon has been an exciting opportunity to delve deeper into the childhood of one of the most iconic characters in television history, Sheldon Cooper. Yet it seems that with every new episode, the spin-off series keeps doubling down on one glaring issue that's been a thorn in the side of loyal fans for years: continuity inconsistencies with its predecessor, The Big Bang Theory. And while some of these are easy to overlook, others are harder to ignore, and Young Sheldon has made a habit of leaning into one particular TBD inconsistency in a way that fans just can't seem to fan of The Big Bang Theory. You've probably already noticed the glaring contradictions between Sheldon Cooper's childhood, as depicted in Young Sheldon, and the backstory he's given in The Big Bang Theory itself. Despite the fact that Young Sheldon was marketed as a chance to flesh out the younger years of Sheldon Cooper in a more consistent and grounded way, the series regularly plays fast and loose with details from his adult life. And once again, young Sheldon leans into one of the most frustrating contradictions between the two shows, adding even more confusion to an already tricky continuity web. But what is it exactly that young Sheldon keeps getting wrong? And why are fans so riled up about it? The Big Bang Theory, Sheldon's self-described childhood. To understand the issue fully, we need to take a look at Sheldon's backstory from The Big Bang Theory. Over the course of the series, Sheldon repeatedly recounts key details of his childhood that paint a very specific picture of who he was growing up. He describes himself as an incredibly gifted but socially awkward child, one who was often at odds with his family due to his intellectual abilities. From the beginning, Sheldon tells us about his relationship with his mother, Mary, who was overprotective and tried to make sure Sheldon had a normal childhood. His father, George, on the other hand, was largely absent, and Sheldon often recounts how his dad didn't understand him or his need for structure. In TBBT, Sheldon's childhood is portrayed as one full of friction, both in terms of his family dynamics and his interactions with his peers. His relationships with his family were not idyllic, to say the least. His father was described as distant, and Sheldon frequently references the turmoil that existed in their home. Young Sheldon, an entirely different childhood. When Young Sheldon first premiered, fans were hopeful that it would provide a more nuanced look at Sheldon's childhood. The show's premise is clear. Take viewers back to Sheldon's younger years when he was growing up in Texas, and give us a closer look at his early experiences and relationships. However, this is where the show runs into a problem. It sometimes seems to contradict the backstory Sheldon gave us on TBD. For instance, in Young Sheldon, we see Sheldon's father, George Sr., in a much more sympathetic light than what was described on TBDT. Far from being the distant, sometimes neglectful father Sheldon often paints him as, Young Sheldon shows George as a loving, albeit flawed, father figure who is invested in his son's intellectual development. He supports Sheldon's academic ambitions and is portrayed as more engaged with his family than Sheldon's recollections would suggest. But that's not the only issue. The character of Mary Cooper, Sheldon's mother, is also painted in a somewhat different light. While on The Big Bang Theory, Sheldon's recollections of Mary seem to paint her as a more controlling, somewhat overbearing figure, Young Sheldon showcases her as a nurturing and supportive mother who constantly tries to encourage Sheldon and keep peace in the family. Fans have pointed out that this portrayal is inconsistent with the way Sheldon often talks about his childhood in TBD, where he alludes to clashes with his mother over his intellectual abilities and her attempts to make him normal. After all, Young Sheldon is a prequel, and some creative liberties are to be expected, right? Well, the problem arises when these inconsistencies go beyond simple interpretation or artistic flair. They start to create a fractured sense of continuity, where the details don't add up. Sheldon may be talking about his childhood on TBD as though it was full of conflict, yet Young Sheldon shows us a much more harmonious family life, one that seems too idealized compared to Sheldon's later memories. The result is a jarring inconsistency that leaves fans scratching their heads. The family dynamics that don't quite line up. One of the most glaring issues in terms of inconsistency is the portrayal of Sheldon's relationship with his twin sister, Missy. In The Big Bang Theory, Sheldon's interactions with Missy are often strained, with him poking fun at her for being normal and treating her with a sense of condescension. In contrast, Young Sheldon presents them as having a much more playful and affectionate relationship, with Missy often acting as a foil to Sheldon's intellectual pursuits. While this is certainly more entertaining for viewers, it clashes with the Sheldon we know from his adult years, who consistently downplays his relationship with Missy as unimportant or even annoying. Even Sheldon's intellectual abilities seem to be portrayed inconsistently. In TBBT, Sheldon's extraordinary intellect is one of his most defining features, and he frequently recounts how his intellectual pursuits alienated him from his peers. However, young Sheldon presents him as a much more well-adjusted child prodigy who not only interacts well with his teachers, but even manages to charm a number of adults who recognize his brilliance. This might seem like a small detail, but it contradicts Sheldon's more bitter adult perspective, in which he is constantly alienated by the lack of recognition for his genius in his childhood. The bigger question, is it worth it? So, why does young Sheldon continue to lean into these inconsistencies? It's not that the show's creators are necessarily ignoring the source material. It's that they're playing up the drama and humor of Sheldon's formative years for the sake of the narrative. The show's goal is to entertain, and in doing so, it often leans into a more polished, idealized version of Sheldon's childhood, rather than staying true to the more conflicted version we saw in The Big Bang Theory. It's certainly a choice that makes for a more enjoyable show in some ways, but it also leaves fans wondering, can you really call young Sheldon a true prequel if it continues to break the continuity established in The Big Bang Theory? The frustrating part for fans is that these inconsistencies undermine the grounded, relatable world that The Big Bang Theory so carefully crafted. The show may have been filled with zany humor and larger-than-life characters, but it was rooted in the idea that these characters were complex, with messy histories and imperfect families. By leaning into the contradictions, young Sheldon risks undermining that depth in favor of an easier, more entertaining version of Sheldon's life, one that doesn't always make sense in the grand scheme of things. In the end, perhaps this inconsistency isn't something fans can change, but it does raise an interesting question about the nature of prequels in general. Should they stay true to the original show's backstory, or is it acceptable to take creative liberties for the sake of entertainment? Whether or not young Sheldon can ever reconcile these differences is still up in the air, but one thing is for sure, fans will continue to debate it for years to come. Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and stay with us.